Well, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Kathy Burlow, founder and president of PDX Veg, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to Linda Tyler's cooking demonstration on how to create a healthy, simple, and flexible plant-based meal plan. Linda is an author and recipe creator, and she has a fantastic website at graciousvegan.com that has recipes, links to her cookbooks, and a really comprehensive question and answer section with answers to a wide range of questions on vegan health, meal planning, cooking techniques, and more. And today she's going to share strategies and recipes from her recently published book, Cook Once, Eat Better, a flexible plant-based meal prep system, which provides a 12-week vegan meal prep method that involves batch cooking easy, nourishing, and flavorful meals once a week and eating well every day. And as you see, we're recording this and we're going to put the video on our PDX Veg YouTube channel and send a link to everybody who signed up for this event and also for our Veg Challenge. And if you have questions, you can ask them by writing them in the Q&A section. I think there's a button at the bottom of your screen for that, and I will read them out loud to Linda. And I will now turn it over to Linda. Thanks, Linda.
Okay. Thank you, Kathy, and thank you for the invitation to be here. Thank you, everyone, for coming. And I look forward to the next 75, 90 minutes where I can demonstrate some things, share some ideas, and get answers to your questions, and then show you how to do a week's worth of prep. So I wanted to start with some PowerPoint slides just to set the stage and frame the discussion about meal planning and meal prep. So I'm going to share my screen with my PowerPoints. Let me do that again. Share. Okay. And start the slideshow. Okay, so Kathy already mentioned these things about me. My website is The Gracious Vegan, and these are my three cookbooks, plant-based anti-inflammatory cookbook, Cook Once, Eat Better, which we're going to talk about, and you have a sample from. And just recently, purely plant-based cheese, healthy cheese recipes for vegan cooks. So they are sort of different formats, different emphasis. And I hope you'll check those out. You can go to my website and find out more about those cookbooks. Um, so these were needs that I heard from my students on a very regular basis. A lot of people know they should meal plan, but find it hard to do. If you have done it every sort of week of your life, it seems like a low maintenance type of thing to do. But if you don't, like any new habit, it is hard to get into and find your rhythm. So a lot of people have a challenge with meal planning. They don't like to do it. And they find it's hard to find time for planning and shopping and prepping and cooking and storing. And so it's easy to de-emphasize those when it's not already a part of your life and you want to form these new habits. Time feels like the real enemy. People want a variety of meals. Obviously, some people are okay with leftovers and can eat things for 3 or 4 days in a row. Other people do not like that. Protein, a lot of people want to go plant-based, but they want to hit their protein goals, and that feels unsure. And they want to make that part of their meal planning so they can ensure they hit those goals, but they don't know how. So we'll talk a little bit about that today too. And some people have a family cook for their family, or their family is not plant-based, or a spouse is not plant-based, or a partner is not plant-based. And so they want to feed themselves with something healthy without having to cook 2 meals every day. So the thought of making some things once a week was attractive to them. So these are some of the challenges and needs that I heard from my students at Portland Community College. And so I was responding to those in developing some ideas around meal planning and meal prep. But I wanted to back up here in terms of meal prep. And by meal prep, I mean making making meals or components of meals ahead of time, dedicating a couple hours, one day a week, usually toward making some things that you can use later in the week. That's what I mean by meal prep. And some scientists, researchers have actually studied this and tried to figure out like what are the benefits and tried to quantify those benefits. And they fall into three buckets. The first is nutritional benefits, and people tracked people who did some meal prep once a week and others who didn't, and found that people's diet was of a higher quality and they made healthier food choices and they were better able to reduce their risk of obesity, better able to manage their weight when they had food that they had made ready to eat. They tended to eat that food because it was easiest once they'd made it, and it was healthier food than the food they would otherwise have eaten for that lunch or dinner. So that health and nutritional benefits were number one, and probably most of us would say that's probably the biggest benefit to meal prep. A second was financial savings and efficiency. People think, oh, that's a lot of time to dedicate to making food one day a week. But it actually, in the long run, added up to less time during the week because if you're sort of deciding on lunch and dinner before each meal, that time really adds up. So putting it all into one effort on a day off can really, in the long run, save you time. And also, of course, these researchers found that people saved money. And you can imagine when you don't have something planned, you might eat out more. And I think all of us are aware how much eating out costs now. It's really, really gone up the last 5 or 6 years, and it's expensive to eat out. Now, groceries have also gone up, but I don't think they've gone up as much. And so if you can plan and make one trip to the grocery store for the week or maybe two, you're liable to spend less money in total on eating that week. And then psychological benefits was maybe like an intuitive type of benefit that the researchers found, that it reduced stress to have your food already made and know what you're going to eat. It's easy to suffer from decision fatigue, having to decide on your meals every lunch, every dinner, every day. What am I going to have? You know, it's 5 p.m. and you open the refrigerator. Oh my God, what can I put together? So it is, they found these psychological benefits. And also, once people started doing the meal prep, they felt in more control of their lives. They felt an increased sense of self-efficacy and they felt positive about the new habit. So there are psychological benefits as well. So on the flip side, yes, there are benefits, but the opposite of meal prepping can really lead to some things that you don't want in your life. Because if you shop or if you try to decide on dinner when you're hungry, study after study has shown that when we are hungry, psychologically, our brains change a bit. We make more impulsive purchases. We eat more calories. We arrive, we order things on the menu we might not have that we might not otherwise have ordered. And so we eat more indulgent foods, higher calorie foods because we're hungry. So our body says, we need to eat, we need to eat, we need to eat good stuff. So there's a lots of things we want to avoid in terms of going into meal preparation in a hungry state. So And the benefits that I've been talking about accumulate significantly over time. Obviously, the financial savings accumulate. You waste less food because you don't have food in your refrigerator that you forgot about and then you have to throw away. Of course, better nutrition accumulates over time and better portions, and everything about the habit increases and improves over time. So the bottom line is, the participants in a lot of these studies love the convenience because once they did it, immediately the next day, it felt more convenient. But the research-based benefits on diet quality, weight management, and financial health were sort of the larger, longer lasting benefits. So all sorts of reasons to consider doing more meal planning and meal prepping. So we're going to do it from a plant-based perspective. And this is the book that I self-published that Kathy mentioned, which you're obviously not required to purchase. You got a little bit of a chunk in the sample that we sent out, and this is the cover. And if you wanted to order an actual paperback version of the entire 96-page book, you can go to Amazon and get that. But you don't have to, and you'll see from the sample a sample week. And then if you want to just design your own or just keep repeating this week or make small changes, that's great too. But it's one model of a meal prep system. So what I designed was every week you cook 4 components. One component is whole grains or starchy vegetables, maybe potatoes, maybe today we're making quinoa, maybe rice, maybe wheat berries, or just make whatever your favorite grains or starchy vegetables are. And then the second component is legumes, beans, lentils, split peas, or other plant-based protein like tempeh or tofu or soy curls. So I have a lot of different options for the protein component there. And then non-starchy vegetables, green vegetables, so maybe kale, maybe a big salad, kitchen sink salad is one of the choices, or maybe some steamed zucchini, or like today we're going to roast some vegetables. And then always a sauce or a dressing. So there's something yummy to drizzle on these things so they taste even better. So I tried to make the recipes as easy as I could, but still taste good. And I offered different ways you could combine the components for meals during the week. So it's not that you just have a plate with 4 things on them. I have some other ideas for how you could use the components in tasty meals. So you're not just eating the same meal every day. And then I put everything together in a shopping list so you don't have to make a shopping list. And then some easy dessert recipes. We're going to make one dessert today. And then some guides for steaming and roasting vegetables and cooking grains and baking potatoes. So if you need, we're going to use 2 of those guides today. And they're included in the sample that Kathy sent to you. So this is a sample week. This is the one we are going to work from today. So these are the 4 components. We're going to make a batch of quinoa, some easy cannellini beans, some roasted cauliflower, and some hummus dill sauce. So those would be the things you make during the meal prep session. And then I have a whole page in the cookbook or in the guide for ways you could use these components. So I put in bold the foods that you would have to buy or have as extra. A lot of us have salsa around the house or lettuce or tortillas. So you just want to glance over those before you go to the store to see if there's some kind of combination that has something extra that you want. But I have some breakfast ideas, some lunch ideas, and some dinner ideas. And so you can check those out. And those all utilize the components, one or more of the components, sometimes with other other ingredients that you would need to have at home. So then you get a shopping list organized by, where in the store they are, of course, and then the recipes. And you got the recipes today as well. So that is the introduction and framework. And let me just pause, Kathy. Are there any questions at this point?
Not yet, but I will keep you posted.
Okay. Okay, great. So we're going to start with the cauliflower because that takes the longest and has the oven on. I don't like to use my oven in the summer, but it's not too bad today. And so we'll make the cauliflower first, and then we will turn off the oven. So what I want to do is share my method. It is in the appendix of your sample called Roasting Vegetable Guides. It has page 94 on it because that's the original in the guide. I think, oh, it is the last page of your sample if you have it up on your screen or if you printed it out. And I like to cook without oil. If you cook with oil and you're roasting vegetables, you may have a tried and true way for roasting vegetables. That's fine. I like to cook without oil, so I like to make a simple coating and then put my vegetables in that coating, toss them in the oven. So I'm going to make the coating first, show you how I do that without oil, and then we'll go to then we'll cut up the cauliflower and put it in the oven. So the first step is to line a pan with parchment paper. So I already did that, a sheet pan. And then I'm going to make this coating. So we're going to start with 3 tablespoons of water. And 3 tablespoons of tahini, which are smashed, slightly roasted sesame seeds. Tahini is used in hummus, and baba ganoush, number of Middle Eastern dishes, and it is from the whole sesame seed. So it has protein, fiber, as well as natural fats. So all those taste good, are good for you, and are great in a preparation like this. And then 2 teaspoons of miso. You could just use some salt, like a half teaspoon of salt. I like to use miso, which is fermented, in this case, soybeans with salt. So it's salty, but it is the salt, the effects of the sodium in miso are counteracted by the effects of the fermented soybeans. So the sodium doesn't affect your blood pressure the same way. Oops, 2 teaspoons, not 2 tablespoons. Let's back that out. Phew, it just landed in the water. Okay. All right. 2 teaspoons of miso. And then a 1/4 teaspoon of onion powder. So these get some savory spices in there. Garlic powder. I used a lot of spice powders in these recipes because they are of so much of a time saver compared to prepping all the vegetables. And this is smoked paprika, a wonderful spice for plant-based cooking. I like to get the Spanish smoked paprika. Really makes such a difference. It has kind of a bacony cured meat type flavor, that smokiness, and it improves everything it comes into contact with. So you can just incorporate that miso, especially because it tends to clump. But again, if you use just some salt, you won't have that issue. Things combine pretty easily. Then we're going to put our cauliflower in because we're going to make roasted cauliflower. So I washed my head of cauliflower beforehand, so I don't need to wash separately. After I cut these florets, I'm going to cut off these brown bits. I don't really know what those are. They're not green, they're brown, but we're going to cut those off. And then I'll just show you how I get the florets of a cauliflower off. I just kind of cut these greens off. You can, if you're super patient, get the good parts of these greens and roast them separately and eat them. I did that a couple times and didn't find them very tasty at all. And oftentimes they're damaged. So I tend not to do that anymore, but you could. So then I try to cut out the larger florets at the bottom because I will subdivide them. A few more. Get the rest of those spots off. And then just keep, starting from the bottom as I did. Just keep cutting them off the core. And then we'll discard the core. It's very, very tough. And then some pieces will already be a good size, so I will just put them in there. And others might need, one cut to make them bite-sized. They don't have to be super small, but just a little larger than bite-sized, I would say. And there's no right way to do this. Just find a way to cut them into chunks. I use this 4-inch serrated paring knife for this job, but a lot of different knives would work. Probably not a chef's knife. You want to be a little closer to the food than a 10-inch chef knife. So again, just rustic chunks here, nothing fine-tuned really. And then some of them will naturally separate. That's always nice. And with any of these recipes, you can double the recipe if you know, like, oh, I'm really going to like this and I'm really going to want to eat a lot of it. Or you can have the recipe if you know you're not going to eat much of it. Obviously, if you don't think you'll like something, you don't have to make it. Substitute something else. All right. So there's our cauliflower. Prepping cauliflower does not take very long, which is nice. Another advantage. So there it is. We made the coating in the big bowl so we don't have to get 2 bowls dirty. And then we just keep folding it and folding it until they're nice and coated. Okay. And then it's ready to put on the pan. And an important thing about roasting vegetables is to spread them out. The less they touch each other, the better. The more you're going to get nicely browned vegetables, which is particularly important if you're not using oil, because the oil has a higher smoke point then tahini and water, so things get darker. So we'll still get some nice edges, but it's important to spread things out. All right. So I'm going to put this into the oven. The oven is at 425 with convection. Most modern ovens have convections. Convection is a fan that that circulates the air better, so all the surfaces get a lot of heat. So that's what I use is 425 with convection. If you don't have convection, I would use 450 or 425, and it'll just take longer than these timings here. So I'm going to put that in at, I'm going to say 20 minutes, and we'll see where it is at 20 minutes. Okay. That is our cauliflower. I will obviously have time to see how it turns out, but you can see that didn't take too long to make. So that's number one. Four more to go because we're making a dessert. Okay. All right, now let me get these bits of cauliflower out and we will start the quinoa. So again, if you don't like quinoa, you can make any kind of grain that you like. But quinoa is great because it's high in protein as well as fiber, and it's gluten-free. So a lot of people like quinoa for that reason. So let's go to the other appendix page that you got, which is the whole grains cooking guide. So one page shows you how to make grains on the stove and in the Instant Pot, which is what we're going to demonstrate today. And then the other page is a guide with timings, with the amount of liquid and the number of minutes for stovetop and for Instant Pot with all these different kinds of whole grains. So you have a lot to choose from. But we're going to choose quinoa. And today we are going to use vegetable broth as well as the quinoa, of course. So first I'm going to make white quinoa today. You could make red, tricolor. There is such a thing even as black quinoa, if you can find it, but we're not going to make that today. So all of my amounts in the guide are for 1 cup of dried grain. So this is a 1/4 cup, which fits in the top of the jar. So I'm going to put 4 of these in here to get my 1 cup of dried quinoa. And then for white quinoa, we want 1 1/4 cups of broth or water. And I'm going to do broth because it does make it more savory. Now, if you were going to use quinoa at breakfast, which is one of the options, maybe you love quinoa with some plant-based milk, with some berries at breakfast, warm it up. It's super good. Don't use the broth. That would be not so good. So I use a broth powder that I make. That's on my website if you want to get this broth powder recipe. But any kind of vegetable broth works, maybe from a bouillon cube, from Better Than Bouillon, that paste that comes in a jar, or just the cartons of vegetable broth, or homemade, of course, any kind of vegetable broth solution that you like works well here. And then 1 1/4. So I just add that as water at this point. And then a quick stir. Quick stir in there. Doesn't have to be perfect. Sometimes a little bit of the quinoa gets on the side of the pot it's okay. You can just leave it there. By the time the high pressure makes everything boil, it goes all the way up the sides, and they will be cooked well. So the key to cooking grains is to let it sit after the pressure cooking is done for 10 minutes so that the grains all get very much thoroughly hydrated. So these only take 2 minutes at high pressure, but for those of you who do Instant Pot cooking, you know it takes a while for the Instant Pot to get up to high pressure. Then it cooks it for the time that you specify, in our case, 2 minutes. And then after it's done, we let it sit before we take the lid off for 10 minutes. And that helps finish the hydration and kind of the fluffing of the grains. So that's how it works with almost all these grains. Now, some grains take 30 minutes or more. So it just depends on the grain. Some like wheat berries take a long time, but quinoa is super fast with only 2 minutes at high pressure. I teach a whole series on the Instant Pot at Portland Community College. So if you have an Instant Pot, but you never use it, you might want to look for that class or that series of classes. Okay. I can feel the oven. All right. Okay, so that's our grains. So essentially, we're going to have a batch of roasted cauliflower. We're going to have a batch of quinoa, about 3 cups of quinoa. And then we're going to make some beans for our protein and fiber as well. Beans are a wonderful food for protein and fiber. I try to eat about 1.5 cups of beans every day, or other, protein equivalents to that. And I drink a lot of soy milk or other high protein milk as well, and try to eat some chia seeds and some nuts as well. So I try to get plenty of protein, and it's really possible on a plant-based diet. Okay, so we're going to make easy cannellini beans, and these are surprisingly tasty for the effort that'll go into it. You'll see the effort that goes into it. It's really pretty light effort. And then you can use those in bowls. You can use them in sandwiches or wraps. You can use them in a skillet dish. You can do all sorts of things with them. Once you've seasoned them, they're really good to eat, either by themselves or with other things. So I'm going to move my computer just a little bit so we can see. Yeah, so we can see the stove. All right, so we're going to start with canned beans. Of course, this is why it doesn't take as long, because the beans are already cooked and in cans. And actually, before this session, I also rinsed and drained them in a colander, and I just put them back into their cans. So I love the cannellini beans. You could also use navy beans for these. The spices really work well. Any kind of white bean works well with these spices. So we start with those in the saucepan. Again, you could make half as much, twice as much, however you want to do that. And then we add 1.5 cups of vegetable broth. So I'm going to use the same vegetable broth that I used for the quinoa, my special vegetable broth powder. And 1.5 cups. All right. And then we're going to use some bunch of nice spices in here. Let's see, a teaspoon of rosemary. If you have fresh rosemary, You could use a couple of teaspoons of chopped fresh rosemary instead of dry. A teaspoon of thyme. Those two spices go so well together. A teaspoon of onion powder. Again, instead of chopping and sauteing onions, this works surprisingly well. Onion powder comes out to have a milder taste than fresh onions, which in some preparations is really a good thing. Teaspoon of garlic powder. I'm almost at the end of my garlic powder here. Okay. And then a pinch of red pepper flakes just for a little bit of spiciness, little bite. You don't have to include any, but I find red pepper flakes are less surprising than the equivalent amount of cayenne pepper, which can be pretty darn. So I'm going to stir this just a little bit. It's hard to see in there. It's just those ingredients. You can see this is a 2-quart saucepan, which is a good size for this. I'm going to heat it up on my larger burner and then maybe move it to the smaller burner. So we get that, we bring the mixture to a boil, then we turn the heat down to a simmer, and we simmer it without the top on until the liquid has reduced and thickened for 6 to 8 minutes. So what that does is it hydrates the beans more. I don't know if you guys have come to think that some canned beans are too hard, when you open the can, they're cooked, of course, but they're just kind of hard. So I like this method of softening them up a bit. So they absorb some of the liquid and then some of the liquid evaporates off and some of the starch from the beans leaches out into the liquid and makes the liquid thicker. So it's not just beans in water, it's beans in a thicker liquid, not quite a gravy, but a thicker. And so it tastes really good on its own with its liquid, or if you say have some quinoa and you put some of the beans over, that liquid can be almost the sauce in itself because it has all those spices that we put in, the thyme, the rosemary, the onion, and the garlic. So it's sort of a self-contained beans with sauce, really. So I hope if you try this that you will see what I mean in terms of having its own sauce. And then if you want to use these beans, say in a wrap, let you lay out your wrap and then just spoon them out without the liquid to use on a wrap. And you could even spoon some into a bowl and mash it. So it's like mashed beans. You could make it that way as well. So all sorts of ways that you could use these in different dinner or lunch preparations. So what we're going to do after these are cooked, they're 6 to 8 minutes after they start boiling, we're going to add some lemon juice, which adds a little bit of fresh acid to it, and then some miso, again, some saltiness to it. You could, again, add just regular salt and some pepper, and then you could add some extra herbs if you like, some parsley, etc. So we will get this boiling. I will tell you when it's boiling and we'll turn it down, and then we will simmer it for 8 minutes, and then I'll show you the result there. Okay. So that's our third element. So we made the cauliflower, it's cooking. We made the quinoa. It is almost done with its 2 minutes of high pressure. There's the ding, if you can hear that. So I'm gonna put a timer on there for the 10 minutes. We're not going to open it for 10 minutes so that the grains can continue to absorb the water evenly. Great. So now we've got 3 things going. Doesn't hurt to be a good multitasker. And then our final of the 4 savory components, we still have dessert to make. The final is the sauce. And I wanted to design super easy sauces too, because any kind of sauce, but also plant-based sauces can get complicated. So I went for easy. That's what I wanted for folks. And one of the great components you could use for sauces is hummus, already made hummus. And so now I have to find the hummus. Where did I put the hummus? I have to find that. Oh, there it is. Okay, here we go. So if you add a few things to hummus and thin it out with some water, it's a great sauce that you can put on to, again, sandwiches. You can put it on bowls. You can put it right on, drizzle it onto the beans, drizzle it onto the quinoa, even drizzle it onto the cauliflower. So it adds flavor. It also adds fiber and protein because it's made from chickpeas and tahini mostly, with some lemon juice and garlic usually. So we're going to just pump up the garlic a little and thin it out, and also add some dill because dill goes super well with the flavor of hummus. So we're going to make it in a blender. You can use a small smoothie blender, but I find it works better in a stand-up blender. It's just a lot of hummus for a smoothie blender to cut through. So I am going to put the garlic in our blender jar, and then we need some water here, a 1/3 cup of water. So I'm going to put that in the bottom. Is the 1/3 cup. Oh, that's good. We may have to add more. It depends, it depends a lot on the particular hummus. And then the dill. This is the dill weed, dry dill weed, 1.5 teaspoons. And then the hummus itself. This works with lots of different brands of hummus. I usually get the plain hummus for this kind of sauce, but you could experiment with, red pepper hummus or garlic hummus or other hummus flavors. Just gonna, okay, we have our beans are boiling. So I am going to move them to the back burner, literally. And put a timer on those. I happen to have a lot of timers, but you can also use your phone. You can do multiple timers on your phone. Or I think Alexa even does multiple timers with names. I don't think my phone gives them names, but okay. And we're getting close on the cauliflower too. All right, I am going to go back here and blend. You may need to stop and wipe down and possibly add more water when you blend this sauce. We'll see what happens. Okay. That worked well, but let's check the consistency. It's pretty good. I think if I had a pretty thick hummus, but I am going to leave it at that consistency. I can always thin it out as I go, take some out and thin some and not thin others. I could use this even for a vegetable dip. It's thinner than most hummus because I did add that water to it, but not super, super thick. So I like that texture right now. So now I have for the week a sauce I can put on lots and lots of things. So if you want, you could start with the 1 cup of hummus. If it's your first time and you don't know if you're going to like it, start with 1 cup, see if you like it. If you like it, make a whole batch or just enjoy a half batch. All right, so that was probably the quickest sauce that was ever made. And we've got our beans are simmering at a low temperature. And we're going to check our cauliflower. All right, so our multitasking is starting to come to a head. Everything's finishing at the same time. So let's check our cauliflower. Ideally, maybe you'll have some help with your meal prep and it won't feel like everything's coming to a head. So you can see we've got some good browning. I am going to check with a knife. I like to check with the knife and see how it's going. It'll cook just a little bit more as it sits on the hot pan, but most people would say this is done. And then there's a lot of, if we look at individual pieces, they are dark on the back, where they were touching the pan. So we've got a lot of nice color. I think it's good. I think they're done. I'm going to just get a lot of people say, oh, you should really flip your vegetables, and you'll get more color on the one side that's down if you don't flip. So that's up to you if you want to flip or not. I find you get more color if you leave it a longer time for the first roast. Okay. So there is our cauliflower. That is done. And you can see we made the coating, we put in the cut cauliflower, put it on the pan, put it in for 20 minutes, and we're done. We have a nice batch of roasted cauliflower. And the procedure for, broccoli is the same. You could roast potatoes this way. Things like zucchini or eggplant that there's all sorts of things you can make using this method. That's why I put it in the appendix, because it's so similar from vegetable to vegetable, just kind of the timing's different. All right. So we'll show everything on one plate at the end. Okay, so we have our cauliflower done. Quinoa is at 9 minutes, so why don't we declare the quinoa done as well, and let's take a look at it. So I'm going to, now that it's waited for 10 minutes after the pressure cooking is done, I'm going to flip the venting knob so all the rest of the steam escapes and it brings it down to regular room pressure. And then I'm going to open the lid and I'm going to fluff the grains. So I'm going to turn it off. Okay. So good here. You get these. So there's the grains at the bottom. Let me I like to get a fork immediately and make sure I don't think they would stick together because the amount of water to grain is, I've made it so many times, hundreds of times. It's a really good ratio. And so it's nice and fluffy. The grains are separate. You can see the little quinoa tails. It's a really good timing, works well. So that is our quinoa. Another one done. And our beans are almost done. Our sauce is done. All right, the beans are now done. Timer number 3. So let's check these out. Let me get a little bit of a ladle here. And if you think, I'd like mine done more, you could leave them on the stove. They'll thicken up as well. That sauce will thicken up after it's stored and cooled. So I think I was simmering them low. I'm going to simmer again. You're going to have to make some situational judgments. I'm going to simmer them another few minutes. I think my simmer was a bit on the low side. I'd like them to be a little thicker. Okay. All right. So now let's move on to dessert. And I included in my meal plan guide 6 different desserts, and they're all easy to make and healthy as desserts go. So the one I chose for today is the peanut butter cereal bars. If you don't like peanuts, you could use almond butter, cashew butter, any kind of nut butter that you like. And we start by lining an 8 or 9-inch pan with parchment paper. So you want to have a little bit of extra on 2 sides so you can pull that out like a hammock. Once they are chilled, then you can cut them up much more easily if they're not in the pan. So that's why we have the little hammock situation there. And so the first thing we do, essentially, we're going to warm up the nut butter with some agave syrup, some sweet syrup, and we're going to avoid corn syrup. And then we are going to put in flaxseed meal and cereal, low sugar cereal, and then spread that out in the pan. And then we're going to melt a few chocolate chips on it because that really makes it good. All right, so I have a small Dutch oven here, any kind of large pan. It's going to have to fit 3 cups of cereal. So you don't want your small 2-quart pan. You want something bigger than a 2-quart saucepan. So we're going to heat up I'm going to use agave syrup. And the reason I like it is because it has a low glycemic index. So especially if there's diabetes in the family, or you want to keep your blood sugar low, agave syrup is a low glycemic index food, which is nice. But you could also use date syrup or maple syrup as well. Maple syrup adds more of a flavor. Date syrup does well, but date syrup adds kind of a caramely flavor. And agave syrup really doesn't add much flavor at all per se, except it's nice and sweet. So it's made from the same plant, the same cactus plant that tequila comes from, agave. All right, let's up the beans. So the beans are now done. So we warmed the that we're warming up the syrup. Here, let me put it on the back burner. Okay. We can see in there if we want to. We want to warm it up until it's almost boiling. It's hard to see in there. It's against the blue of the pan. It's almost impossible to see. So we warm the syrup in a Dutch oven, and then we turn off the heat and stir in the peanut butter. So this is kind of like, I don't know if you guys remember making popcorn balls or Rice Krispie treats or anything with marshmallow cream or corn syrup. We used to make popcorn balls a lot at my house. Okay, this is warm, almost boiling. So we're going to turn it off and add the peanut butter. 2/3 cup of peanut butter. As I said, you could experiment with almond butter, cashew butter, and just stir that. Just be patient. They will integrate together. They will not integrate well once you add those next ingredients, the cereal and the flaxseed meal. So it's important to get them super smooth. Some of the peanut butter was at the bottom of the jar. And you know, with those natural peanut butters, some of that peanut butter is kind of thick at the bottom. So I'm making double sure that if I see any lumps, I'm pressing those away. Stubborn. All right. Okay. And then we are going to put in our low sugar cereal. I'll talk about those in a minute, but I don't want to delay too much because the heat of this helps to melt the chocolate chips. So we stir in, gently fold in the cereal and the flaxseed meal. Flaxseed meal has wonderful omega-3s and protein and fiber. And depending on the cereal you have, also a lot of good fiber. Of course, peanuts have fiber and protein as well. So we've got some good things going on here. All right. Those are nicely folded together. Then we are going to quickly put them in the pan. And then we want just a little bit of chocolate on top. So we have a nifty trick for melting the chocolate on top. Just spread these out. And you'll see in the instructions, we're going to refrigerate this for a couple hours afterwards. And that's when things start to stick together. Right now, it looks like, oh my God, they're not going to stick together at all, but they do. The flaxseed helps in that regard. And then just as the peanut butter and the agave syrup harden up, they help everything stick together too. Okay, now we're going to take 1/3 cup of vegan chocolate chips, pour those on the top, and then put a pan over for a couple minutes, and the residual heat from those from the hot agave syrup will help to melt those, and then we'll spread them out so that we get a little bit of chocolate on everything. Okay, so as that melts, let's put a plate of all our creations together. You saw that that was, I think, even less than an hour since I talked a while. So I'm going to put some quinoa on the plate. Some roasted cauliflower and some of the beans. Don't need a lot of the liquid on this preparation because I'm going to use the sauce. I'm going to have some of the hummus dill sauce, which is sort of like a component in itself, has some heft to it. And then, so you could have a meal that's simple like this with a bowl, it's almost like a bowl, a Buddha bowl in itself. You could add some raw vegetables, some spinach. You could add almost anything to it. The flavor combination already works well with these together. That's what I did. I kind of designed 12 weeks of combinations like this. And then you could, again, use them in all sorts of ways. I gave you for this combination a bunch of ways you could combine these particular 4 components. So you could make, you could even like make a soup out of the beans. You could make a cauliflower and bean wrap, a quinoa salad, a loaded baked potato. You could bake a potato and then add some beans and some dill sauce to it. You could make a burrito with a few extra ingredients. You could make some pasta and use the dill sauce as the sauce on a pasta with any of these items you wanted to add to the pasta. A Tuscan bean skillet. Have some of the beans with sun-dried tomatoes, some fresh tomatoes, some artichoke hearts, again, whatever you have in your cupboard or in your refrigerator. You could even make some, if you're feeling more adventurous, some stuffed bell peppers with a mixture of the quinoa, the beans, chop up the cauliflower, and use some of the sauce to make them stick together. Stuff the bell peppers in it and bake those until tender. So those are just some of the ideas for how to use 4 components together. And but I am going to, once we're off the air, I'm going to eat this just like this because I know they go together well. All right, let's see if our chips have melted. Let me get a fresh spatula. Not quite, but there's no downside to the chips not being melted. There they go. Some of them are. Probably in a couple more minutes, I'll do this again, and I think they will have melted even more. And then I just have, I don't want like a ton of chocolate on top. I just want a taste of chocolate. So then these go in the refrigerator for a couple of hours, and then I can lift them out, maybe go use a plastic knife on the 2 sides, lift them out with the hammock, put them on a cutting board, and then cut them into pieces and into bars, and then I can put those in a storage container and keep them in the fridge. All right, Kathy, that is our prep course. That is, we made 5 components in less than an hour.
That's
and
impressive.
you can see all the food we're going to have for the
Yeah.
next week.
Yeah, I love the way you have all these different ways to combine these things so that every night
Yeah.
can be, or lunch, dinner can be different, which is
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
we,
It's probably not going to be like all of the food for the week, but most of us have different other things we do during the week. So it lasts for probably 6 to 8 meals.
yeah, and that's great. Were you going to talk about the kind of cereal you were using in the
Yes,
dessert?
thank you. Yeah. So I just kind of drew a line at 5 or fewer grams of added sugar per serving. So what I gave folks in this handout was a list of some of the cereals that I know of that have 5 or fewer grams of added sugar. So there's the list right here. These are actually fruit juice sweetened corn flakes from Nature's Path Organic. So that's one choice. But if you go to a store and either find one of these or just read the labels for added sugar, I find that that's a pretty good, a pretty good limit, five or fewer grams. Some have zero, like Cheerios don't have any grams of added sugar. So if you wanted no added sugars, you could go with some of these have zero. So that's what I wanted to say about the cereals.
Thank you. Thank you. So does anybody in the audience have any questions they want to have answered? And of course, this will be up on YouTube so people could ask questions there. And if I ever see that, I will forward it to you.
Yeah, let me know and I'm happy to answer. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, this was great because it kind of covers all the basics and it has variety and boy, I was impressed with all your timers being at the same time. If somebody wasn't quite so able to do all that together, they could do it sequentially too, I
They
suppose.
could do it sequentially. Yeah. Yeah. You could just wait for something to finish and then, yeah. You could like load the dishwasher while something's cooking and then, yeah, wait for that to finish and do things
Yeah,
sequentially. Absolutely, you could.
yeah. But I'm impressed with your multitasking skills.
Oh, thank you. A lifetime of practice.
Great.
Right.
Yeah, well, it looks like we don't have any questions right
Okay.
now, and we have a lot of people that will probably be watching this later who had
Sure.
conflicts now. Oh wait, there's somebody thanking you who says she's made two of the dishes. So maybe she looked at this ahead of time.
Oh, beforehand.
Yeah, yeah, or else she was doing it along with you. I don't know, but
Oh, okay, great.
uh, yeah,
Okay.
okay. Well,
All right.
well, thank you so much, Linda. This was great, and
You're welcome. It was
yeah,
a
I'll
pleasure.
yeah, I'll be putting it up on YouTube, and everybody will get to see it then.
Okay.
Thanks
All
very
right.
much, and thanks everybody for coming. Take care. Okay,
Thank you.
bye bye.